Mediators, it's really important that you take the time to prepare before the mediation. So remember, you want to arrive at the mediation at least 30 minutes prior to the mediation beginning. And I say at least because if it's your first time at the location, you want to give yourself enough time to make sure you're going to the correct room and make sure that the mediation room that you're using is appropriate for the session. Sometimes our site partners aren't as familiar with the needs of mediation participants, and we get there and we find that it doesn't allow for the privacy that we need, or there aren't enough chairs, or the room just isn't comfortable because of heating or air conditioning issues. So get there early enough so that you and your co-mediator can check that out and can set up the room in a way that promotes as comfortable as they can get conversation at the mediation table. This is a best practice to set up for a table. In the video, you're going to see us sitting in a different arrangement, and that is to accommodate the lighting and the cameras and direction. But this is the setup that we would recommend.
So what's going on the table here? If you notice, there are 4 notepads and 4 pens that all look the same. So you want to do your best to have everybody's materials as much alike as possible. And then you notice that at 2 of the seats, there's the mediator's materials. And so the way people decide where they're going to sit is they just come in and fill in where the mediators are not sitting. And so the mediators' seats are signified by their things. The mediation manual is here, consent to mediate forms, feelings, cheat sheets, value cheat sheets, the framing topics form, which has the framing topics chart on one side, and the how do I know if it's ready to move to step 3 on the other side. The brainstorming overview is there, and also agreement forms are there in case you need those. And then we have tissues in the middle of the table so that anybody can reach them easily if they need them for any reason. We also, since this table is in the middle of the room, we also put the mediation process mat, 2 of them in the middle, and they're facing in opposite directions, so each participant will be able to see them.
Note too that we have the mediators on the farthest end of the table and the participants at the closest end of the table, so it's easier for participants to talk to one another.
Yes.
So mediators would be here on a rectangular table at the longest end, and participants are right here.
Yes. Sometimes mediators are concerned that sitting at the longer end looks like you're at the head of the table, and so they're worried that that might send a message that you're not being neutral. Also note that most rectangular tables have something at the long end that's more uncomfortable. And so on this table, you can't see it, but underneath there are these wider legs that your feet would keep bumping up against. And so you also want to make sure that whoever's going to be uncomfortable with their legs bumping a bar or feet bumping legs, those are mediators doing that for 2 hours and not participants. And so that's also why it often makes more sense to put participants in the middle of a rectangle table.
We're prioritizing the participants in terms of their comfort,
right,
where mediation's happening, when mediation's happening.
Yeah.
Let's get started. We're going to start by prepping ourselves, and you'll see us doing our prep. Okay, so, hey, how's it going today?
Good.
Talk to me about what you are working on.
So things that I would like some feedback around. I'm working on my feeling reflections, having a diversity of feelings. So often what happens is if I give a feeling word and that one flies, I kind of go with that one more in the mediation instead of reaching deeper to get more feelings. And so whether that is listening for a nuance in feelings or different intensity levels, it also might be about asking open-ended questions when I feel the urge to reflect the same feeling like over and over, then maybe there's an opportunity to work on understanding something the person said too. So I guess that's 2 things, like using my open-ended questions to open things up, and also diversifying my feeling words.
Okay, all right. And how can I support that?
So if you just, as you're keeping pluses and deltas, pay attention to the questions I'm asking, and then the reflections I'm doing after to see if I'm, capturing those different feelings and not ones that you heard me say a bunch of times before.
Okay. All right. Cool.
And then things I'm feeling good about. I'm really working on being a present mediator if I'm the one sitting at the table.
Okay.
And so, so I feel good about how I'm doing that right now, because I'm working on making sure that I'm able to talk with other mediators about the importance of doing that. So I feel good about where I am right now with that.
Okay. All right. I am working on making sure my reflections are accessible to the participants.
Okay.
That particularly will show up when I'm reflecting values. I tend to hear values first,
Okay.
but I'll often use a 50-cent word when...
A 10-cent one would have done just fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so if you hear me do that, and particularly if it looks like you see the participants' eyes glaze over. If I don't do it immediately, can you jump in with a more accessible reflection for that?
And what are you feeling good about?
I feel really good about keeping a good handle on topics and tying feelings and values to a topic in a way that's conversational.
Okay.
And I feel like I feel really tight with framing topics in particular.
Okay.
Yeah. So can we talk about, like, I kind of like to figure out who's doing the first reflection and then make decisions about step one first. So do you mind doing the first reflection?
That's fine.
Okay, so
then we
I'll
can go backwards from there.
I'll start off step one.
Okay.
I can do that till we get to the big three.
And then I'll pick up there.
Okay. And if you want to go all the way to the consent to mediate form, and I'll do the consent to mediate.
Okay. What do you like in relation to like communication between mediators during the process?
Mm-hmm.
How do you like to function?
Transparent and real time is best for me. So like if you feel like I've said something not neutral, if you can say something quickly so we can get that rectified. I don't want to go a long time compromising our neutrality.
And do you have a signal for if you hear something that is like, okay, we shouldn't say this out loud, but maybe we should take a break to talk about it, something around safety, or, something that we're wondering, is this not appropriate for mediation?
I'm not good with signals like that. I forget them. So if you, if one of us say, if we call it, just say I need to run to the restroom or something like
then
that.
I know that's the chat with you. Maybe you don't really have to go to the bathroom.
Right.
All right, good.
If you would list the topics in step 3.
Okay.
So you're going to do the first reflection in step 2.
Yes.
And we can take turns framing topics in step 3 if you write them
I'll
up.
list them. Okay.
And then I can do the writing, or at least start the writing for the first brainstorm.
Okay. That's good.
All right.
And if you want to switch off like somewhere in the stages of that first one,
okay,
because that can be a lot of work standing there for all 4 stages, I'm happy to jump in.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
When we're prepping as mediators, what we're doing is we're checking in with each other about what our strengths are as mediators, areas that we are working on for growth and development, and we're also because it's important to us to make sure that we're providing a high quality process for our participants, and they deserve that. We're also working to make sure that we are dividing up each step in the mediation process so that the participants know that they have 2 mediators, that there's not a lead mediator and a second chair mediator. They have 2 co-mediators, and you're working together at your skill level to provide a high quality service. And remember, so in a minute we're going to bring in the participants and we're going to start with step 1. But I want you to remember that the setup that we are going to be filming in is not the setup that we would recommend for mediation. That again is to accommodate the lights and the cameras. This is the best setup. So I would be over here as Ericka's co-mediator. We would be facing each other at the longer ends, and the participants would be at the middle. This is what we would call best practices. I just want to go over one more time In terms of the seating arrangements in the video, that does not reflect our best practices for how we would set up the table for mediation participants. So one more time, mediators would go on the long end and we'd put the participants in the middle. We have the participants on the shorter end to prioritize them being able to converse with one another easily, and the mediators on the long end to be able to support that communication in a way that protects our neutrality. The way we have it set up in the video is to make sure that we have no one's back to the camera so you can see and hear each of us well. But in real mediation, mediators on the long end, participants on the short end. Hello, my name is Tracee Ford, and I'm staff with Community Mediation Maryland. So right now, we're about to go into step 1 in the mediation process. And in this step, you want to make sure that you are dividing up the responsibilities with your co-mediator in step 1 in such a way that at the end of step 1, the participants have a good understanding of what the mediation process is, and they understand that they have 2 mediators. So you want to make sure that you're divvying up the responsibilities so that each of you have a role and the participants can see that each of you are going to be carrying the load of supporting them in this conversation in a way that protects your neutrality. The other thing I want to make sure that you understand is that participants are often have questions about what's happening in the mediation process. And that's fine, that's appropriate. Make sure though that you are responding always as a mediator first. So the first thing that we want to do as mediators in the inclusive mediation model is make sure that we're using our reflections, using inclusive listening before we jump to answering their questions. So remember, reflect what their concerns are first, make sure that you understand before you go into a direct answer of their question. So thank you for coming today. Can we get the names that you would like us to use here at the mediation table?
Tasha.
Tasha, would you please spell that?
Tasha.
Thank you.
Wesley.
Wesley, will you please spell it, Wesley?
Wesley.
Thank you, Wesley. And I'm Tracee.
And I'm Ericka.
Okay. And Ericka and I are going to take a few minutes to explain mediation and make sure that everyone understands the process that we'll be using. Throughout the process, you will see us each using our mediation guide, and that's just to make sure that every time we offer this service, we're offering the same high quality service. You may have heard some of the things that we're going to go over before when you spoke with the intake staff, and we're just going to make sure that we're all on the same page. And after we go through this and get the paperwork taken care of, you'll begin discussing the situation that brought you to mediation. Ericka and I have been trained by Community Mediation Maryland to be your mediators. We have read and will abide by the Maryland Standards of Conduct for mediators during this mediation session. You are welcome to request a copy of the standards from the Mediation Center, or a staff member can direct you to a web link where you can read the standards for yourself.
So now we're going to talk about the steps of the mediation process. So those steps are listed right here for you to see. So step 1 is explain mediation, where we explain the process, and that's what we're doing right now. Step 2 is information gathering, and that's where you'll both tell us about the conflict that brought you here, and Tracee and I are going to ask questions for clarification. During that time, we may meet with you or each other privately.
And so is that where you let him know he needs to follow the agreement that we already had?
Okay, so it sounds like you're looking for follow through with an agreement.
Exactly.
Okay. In this process, what Tracee and I are going to do is make sure we understand all the things that have happened that you all want to talk about, and it sounds like an agreement is one of those things that you want to discuss. So in step 2, that's where we'll hear all about what led to that agreement and what that agreement was, if that's what you want to talk about. Later in the process, which I'll explain in a minute, in step 4, you all will come up with what ideas you had to get that follow through that you're looking for.
Okay.
Okay, and so in step 3, that's listing topics, and that's where we will all list the topics that you all have been discussing. Step 4, brainstorming and developing solutions. So this is where you all would look for solutions to the topics. You give ideas, you pick ideas and identify the ones that may have potential, then you'd adjust the ones with potential, and the ones that you both agree to, you get specific details about how to carry out those agreements. And step 5, that's writing the agreement. And so this is where you find areas of agreement. We can write those down, and everyone can sign it and get a copy, and the agreement may be an enforceable contract. Does anybody have any questions about that so far? Okay.
In a real mediation, Ericka and I would continue to go through the guide. We would cover the big 3, which includes talking about us being non-judgmental. We'd also talk about the components of confidentiality and the voluntary nature of the mediation. We'd explain the notepads and the pens before them and check in about anything related to the courts. We'd talk about logistics, like where the bathrooms are, smoking locations where that can happen. We'd talk about how we handle breaks, and we'd ask everyone to turn their cell phones off or put them on silent. We'd also check in about the time commitment. Mediations are scheduled for 2 hours, and generally we check in about 15 minutes before we're scheduled to end to see if we need to schedule a second session and to go over any paperwork like evaluations and demographic information. So the next thing I'm going to go over is the consent to mediate form. You'll see you have a copy before you. Everything that we hand out, we also read out loud. So after I read through it, if you believe that you can speak for yourself without fear of retaliation, we ask that you sign the form to indicate your decision to use this process right after I finish reading it out loud. Okay? By signing below, I agree to participate in mediation conducted by the Community Mediation Center. I understand that the discussions in this mediation and those with the mediation program staff will remain confidential. This means that the mediators and staff will not share information gathered during intake or during the mediation session with anyone outside of the program. All participants in the mediation, other than the mediator, are free to talk about what was said in the mediation with others other than in a judicial, administrative, or other hearing, unless they agree otherwise in writing. The mediators and program staff will not voluntarily share any information from the mediation in any judicial, administrative, or other hearing. We, mediation participants, will not voluntarily share this information in a judicial, administrative, or other hearing. It is our intention to comply with Annotated Code of Maryland, Section 3-1802, and Judiciary Rule Title 17, which state that mediators and mediation participants may not disclose nor be compelled to disclose mediation communication in any judicial, administrative, or other proceeding. Information regarding child abuse, abuse of vulnerable adults, or credible threats to do bodily harm are exceptions to confidentiality and may be disclosed. Unless we agree otherwise in writing, any written agreement which comes out of mediation is not considered confidential. The mediators signing below have read and, consistent with state law, will abide by the Maryland Standard of Conduct for mediators during this mediation session. Participants are welcome to request a copy, and a copy can be found at mdmediation.org. Mediation is a voluntary process, and each participant may withdraw from the mediation process at any point during the mediation. In this mediation process, I will be responsible for making my own decisions. The mediators will facilitate the process and are prohibited from giving advice or suggestions. Because the decisions made here are mine, I will not hold Community Mediation liable for any decisions made here. We, the undersigned, consent to mediate. We understand that agreements reached in mediation may be enforceable contracts. So if we can all print our names, sign, and date, today is the 20th, and then pass it around to the right so the next person can sign. And I think after this one, each one should have a signed copy, one with copy. And so there'll be a copy for at the center in case you lose your copy or need another copy of the one. All right? Before we move on, Ericka, anything else you feel like we need to cover?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, any questions before we move on to the next step? Okay, so at this point, we're going to move on to step 2. All right, we're going into step 2. At this point, you want to be making sure that you're getting as much information from the participants using inclusive listening. So you want to understand what each of the topics are that the participants are working to make decisions about and their individual feelings and values associated with that. Reflect, reflect, reflect. And as you're looking at your notes, you want to look at which topics don't I understand enough. So in those places, you want to be asking more open-ended questions. Never ask an open-ended question until you have reflected to the participants. One other thing I want to make sure I cover is when they start coming up with solutions, and they often will at this point, those are the solutions they walked in before you introduce them to a collaborative decision-making process. So now they're in a collaborative space and they're using old competitive decisions. At this point, you want to use your process mapping. Process mapping means reminding them about how they're going to use this process. So solutions happen in step 4. So the way that you want to deal with it is first you reflect what their solution is, pulling out all the feelings and values and topics that you heard them discuss in that solution. Then you want to use an open-ended question to bring them back into the solution. A solution that they might say is, well, he just needs to pay me back. And you can say, so it sounds like you're looking for timeliness and reimbursement when it comes to the invoices. Is that correct? And feeling cheated about what's been happening. And when we come to step 4, you'll have an opportunity to come up with all the ideas that get you the fairness and the reimbursement that you're looking for. And right now, can you help me understand how invoices are distributed? Okay, so I used an open-ended question to help get them back into the step. All my open-ended questions in step 2 should be about the present and the past. All right, take a look and see how Ericka and I do that on the video.
Okay, so now we're going to move into step 2 of the process, which is information gathering. So at this point, we're going to ask you both to speak about the situation that brought you to mediation. Then we're going to check to make sure we understand what you both have said. And Tracee and I will also be asking questions to get a better understanding of what you want to discuss in mediation. So what would you all like to talk about today?
Wesley and I are roommates. And, before we became roommates, we sat down and, discussed what it was going to look like and made all of these plans to make sure everything went smoothly. And he just has not kept his end of the agreement. He's just done some stuff lately that really makes me question our friendship. And so I'm here hoping that, we can come to an understanding, and I want to make sure that Wesley knows how important it is to just uphold the agreement that we had. And so that's it.
Thank you. And Wesley, what would you like to talk about today?
So before we were roommates, we had been friends for quite a while, and we decided to become roommates to kind of split expenses and kind of, work on our budgets and whatnot. But I'm kind of a little taken aback by some things as well. But since then, she's talking about hurtful things, and she's also posted on Facebook some hurtful things about me. So, and also, just have an issue with our transportation agreement, and that she's going to school as well, and our schedules don't really match as far as going to school at the same time, so going to campus at the same time. So she wants me to drive her all the time, not the time that we just said. I said maybe I'll be able to do it from time to time, but that plus the post on Facebook have really just, they've gotten to be out of control now. She's making comments, derogatory comments about what I posted, who I'm with in pictures and whatnot. So that's what I want to talk about today.
Thank you. So I'm just going to check in to make sure that we've heard what you all have said so far.
Okay.
And so I'm gonna start with you, Tasha, and then Wesley, I'll check with you to make sure we heard what you were saying. So Tasha, it sounds like you were saying that you're disappointed around the way things are happening. Follow through with some agreements that you all had when you first moved in, it sounds like is important to you, and that you were feeling hopeful about those agreements when you all first came together. And now it sounds like you have questions about what's going on with those agreements. Also, you mentioned something about feeling hurt about some things that were happening. I'm not sure what that's about, so we'll check in to ask some questions, but it sounds like right now you're saying you're feeling hurt as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then Wesley, you were saying that you mentioned the friendship. It sounds like that friendship was important to you, and that you all felt confident about how that friendship would impact living together and sharing expenses. And so you were feeling hopeful when you all first moved in. And it sounds like around transportation, that being helpful was important to you, and now the way it's happening, you're starting to feel burdened, it sounds like you're saying. And also around, you mentioned social media posts. It sounds like you're feeling hurt and offended around some of the comments and posts that are happening there. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Tracee, was there anything you wanted to add there?
I just want to check in about, you mentioned something about your class schedules. And I think I heard you saying like feeling inconvenienced about how transportation around class schedules is happening. Is that correct?
Correct.
What does transportation to and from class look like for both of you?
Well, now it just looks like mostly I'm on my own, because he's never really there to give me a ride when I need a ride. And, you know, I don't need a ride all the time, but when I do, when it's raining or snow, or, you know, when the weather is not good or something like that, or if I'm carrying a lot of stuff, then I'll ask for a ride, but it's not that often. But he's not there for me anyway. And then, you know, this whole thing, he wants me to give him gas like every time I get in his car, which is ridiculous. It's not like we're on some consistent schedule, so.
So I think feeling abandoned with what's been happening with transportation, is that correct?
Absolutely.
And looking for some ideas that get you support, is that right?
Yes.
Around and particularly support around transportation that takes into consideration the weather and your load that day, is that right?
Yes.
And Wesley, can you talk to us about what's happening with transportation for you?
So our original agreement was that I will take her when I could, not all the time. But here lately, and it seems like it's all the time. She talked about the inclement weather, but now we're in the summer. She's taking summer classes, so it's been hot. We've had a long string of hot days, so I've been having to take her every day. But primarily, before then, it still was more often than not, and she doesn't want to, contribute to the gas. She doesn't feel like she has to. And that's really 2 trips. If I take her and come back, and then I have to go back and pick her up, that's really 4 trips now. So, the coming and going does, wear and tear on the tank. So, I just really think that she needs to be more considerate about that when it comes to my time going and coming, and, twice, and then, making a contribution to the gas.
So feeling ripped off about how transportation is happening right now, is that
Ripped
right?
off a little harsh.
Feeling cheated?
I would just say probably I feel a little disrespected about it.
Okay, disrespected, and earlier you mentioned feeling inconvenienced.
Inconvenience.
Yes. Yeah.
And looking for some thoughtfulness when it comes to both your time and the expenses related
Exactly.
to transportation, is that
Exactly.
correct? And I'm not sure, there was something about social media posts or Facebook or something, I wasn't sure what was happening with that.
Well, here lately when I post something, initially when we were would put stuff up on Facebook, it was, you know, funny, haha, you know, we would laugh about it, it was cute. But now it's becoming a little bit more than it's just becoming rude. So I posted a picture the other day, and she wrote in her comment section on my post, "I can't believe you went home with her. You brought her home, or you went out with her, or something of that nature." So I mean, the other person saw it too. So you know, that's a little bit rude, I believe. So you know, those are the types of comments that are coming up on my page now. Comments about the people I go out with, people I go home with, you know, my friends that I hang out with now. So yes, I did post a rather derogatory picture of her after this Halloween party, but everybody was there and everybody saw her outfit, so it wasn't like it was something, you know, nobody saw. But when I retaliated, then it kind of, you know, went back and forth. So it's just kind of, this Facebook thing is kind of escalating now, that, you know, whoever puts up something, somebody makes a negative comment about it to keep the, you know, keep it going.
So Wesley, you were saying something around social media posts, and it sounded like you were saying that you felt offended and shocked around some of the things you've seen. And also, it sounds like you feel protective of your friends and the people that you hang out with. And also, it sounded like you were saying that taking some personal responsibility around how you responded to those posts was something that was important to you, when you talked about the going back and forth now.
Sure.
And how at one point retaliation was important to you, and it sounds like now you're feeling kind of overwhelmed with the way the posts are going back and forth between
Sure.
the two of you at this point. And it sounds like you want to have conversations about how to get some peace around what's happening with social media posts.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
And I wanted to check in. So, what else would you like to talk about in mediation today?
This whole Facebook thing, like, I'm just now hearing that was retaliation. Are you serious right now?
Well, yes, because you posted
Facebook was retaliation.
basically.
And when I told you, you know, when I talked to you about it, you said, "Oh, you know, we just play like that, like it was, like you thought it was a joke."
Well, that last one, "I can't believe you went home with them," was not a joke. You know how I am about my friends, my real close friends, and I felt like you were being disrespectful.
But
The
why
other little
would
stuff that
you
was going on before
post
was
a
like, okay.
picture of me? You know, it was, first of all, it was at a Halloween party, so it was a costume I had on. And you know I had too much to drink. And now it's like I can't even go out of the house.
Well,
Because
it's
I'm
been a
worried
little
about
dramatic. Everybody
people
posted that picture
talking
during
about me.
Halloween.
Over
I just
dramatic.
reposted- Yes, it was posted during Halloween. So all I did was repost what was already posted. It wasn't like it was not there already. Everybody at the party had the picture and they were posting it along with other pictures. So it's like, not like it hasn't been out there. That wasn't the first time it was out there. It's just being talked about now because
This lack of consideration is what the real problem is, because you don't know what it's like to have social anxiety, and then to know that somebody who I call my friend purposely did this to me.
well, that's how I feel as well when you posted about me and my friends.
So, Tasha, I think I'm hearing you're feeling humiliated and betrayed by what happened with the social media posts. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And I also think I'm hearing you saying, like, honesty about the motivations around the post is something that's important to you. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Wesley, I think I'm hearing that you felt insulted by the previous post. Is that correct? And looking for ideas around social media posts that eventually get you respect.
Correct.
And I think I heard that you felt hurt about what's happened in the past around
The initial
the
post,
post.
yes.
Okay.
It was like when I made comments on the post before, like, you didn't say, "Oh, I got a problem with what you you know, we always joked and laughed about it. So, like, how would I even know there was a problem? And then you just go and sabotage me with this Halloween picture. And I have to find out here that you're so insulted about you. Why not just say that to me?
Well, you know, everything that's been going on lately, you know, with the transportation, with the groceries, I mean, just things have been going on. I didn't know what was going on. So, you know, I just feel like everything has been like a problem for the past 2 or 3 weeks. So,
and that would have avoided the
and I thought I was saying things to you, but apparently I feel like you've been ignoring me about what we've been talking about, which is why we're here. Everything around what's been going on between us for the past few days, weeks, maybe almost a month, I guess, has just been back and forth. And I didn't think that, you know, we had gotten to that point, but clearly we did. And when I saw the Facebook post, and then, you know, you're not helping to pay for groceries. It's just one thing after the other.
Oh my God, are you serious with the groceries again?
And the transportation.
We had an agreement to pay half, we would pay half the groceries, you would bring them home. Okay, so I forgot to give you the money the last time. Okay, and
it's more than
I
last
forgot
time,
to give you the
times.
money the last time, and now is in. But hold up. So first of all, you were supposed to pay your half, and we split the cost. Okay, that doesn't mean you have free reign to eat up everything of mine.
Well, when you don't pay, then that means I'm paying for everything, so everything is mine.
No, and see.
I mean, I pay for everything. Everything's mine.
Okay, I forgot to give you the payment. Why don't you just remind me?
Excuse me.
This is
2 times. I have to
ridiculous.
remind you 2 times after every time. Everything was going fine. What's wrong with your memory now?
Oh,
all of a sudden
okay.
you forgetting stuff.
Oh, just like you forget to do the dishes, right?
Forget
Like,
the dishes. How about you forget to
when
put
I
stuff
tell
up?
you,
Every
don't
time
come
I look
in
around,
at 3 o'clock in the morning, waking me up.
You can't tell me what time to
for
come
real,
in.
for real, we want to talk about the transportation. I know it's hot outside. That's why I've been getting up early to try to beat the sun out. But you coming in 3 o'clock in the morning, click clack, banging stuff everywhere, and so I'm waking me up.
How
So
about you
then
click
I'm late in the
with the pots and
morning.
hands first thing when you get up?
So yeah, you should take responsibility for taking me to my class. Because if you wasn't up click clacking everything in the house at 3 o'clock in the morning, then I would have just gotten up early
Are you
and
serious?
walked.
I should take responsibility when you click clack and
Yes,
pots and hands
because I can't
at 7,
sleep,
6,
and
7
then
o'clock
I
in the
have to
morning?
get a ride if I want to be in my class on time.
Well, that's why they make Uber
So-
and Lyft. You rotate between the two of them.
Okay, that's fine. I'll take Uber and Lyft. How about this? How about we get a separate refrigerator, and then we'll see who's able to eat and who's not.
Oh, I'm not pressed about that
Because
because I know
everything I bring in here, you think you have free reign to. No, we're supposed to split the cost. Yes, that one time or whatever,
2 times.
that I forgot to give you the half of the money or whatever. So, you know what?
And can you stop putting things up that you put, that whenever you use stuff? Everything's all over the place. You're just messy. I need you to clean up behind
I'm
yourself.
messy?
Yes.
No, let me be clear. What I don't
Be
pick
clear
up
and be clean.
is the
Pick up
stuff
behind you.
that you have
Oh,
left
no.
behind. And I'm not your maid.
Likewise.
No, I'm not your maid.
I can't
And so-
find things that I have in house. I don't know where it is. I look one day it's here, the next day it's gone. I don't know what's going on.
You need to, everything has a place.
Right.
When you use it, put it up. Okay?
You need to be
when you
responsible
use the
about your
dishes,
things.
wash them. I'm
Likewise.
not here.
Nobody
to
asked
pick
you
up
to be
after
my maid, but
so
you need to
yeah,
clean up
I'm
behind
leaving
your
that
stuff
stuff
as well.
because I didn't put it there. We grown. Put it where you got it from.
Exactly. You need to follow your own instructions.
So let me just jump in right here just to see if Tracee and I can catch some of the things we've been hearing so far. So there were a few things in that last piece. You all were talking about, well, Wesley, a few minutes ago you were talking about the Facebook post.
Right.
And you were saying that you felt, again, protective of your friends, and it sounded like you felt comfortable and justified around posting the Halloween picture. And also it sounds like you are looking for ways to talk about how to get peace around what's happening with the social media posts
Correct.
now. And it sounds like you were saying, Tasha, and related to the social media, you were looking for directness around and conversations about how you both felt around what was going on. You were looking for directness, and so you're feeling shocked to hear today about what was going on with the social media posts, and that you felt exposed and embarrassed around the Halloween picture as well. Is that right? And then you all were talking some about housekeeping in this last part, and you were saying, Tasha, that you're feeling burdened around the way housekeeping happens right now, and you're looking for that order is important to you as well. And Wesley, you were saying that cleanliness is important to you, and each person's personal responsibility for their own belongings is something that's important to you in the way housekeeping takes place. And there was some stuff in there as well about transportation, and you were saying, Tasha, that your rest is important to you, and that at times you feel disturbed around what happens when Wesley comes home. And that you're looking for understanding around how your rest impacts your schedule in the morning and what time you have to get up. And it sounds like you were saying that personal responsibility was important to you around transportation. And you've been, it sounds like you're looking for understanding. I'm not sure if it's appreciation or understanding around, you were talking about making attempts to get up early.
Exactly, because I'm a considerate person.
So that's about consideration being important to you for Wesley's schedule as well. And it sounded like you were saying that in the morning, when you're asleep at times, that quiet is important to you in the morning.
And
as
not
it
pots and
pertains
pans
to your
playing in the
rest.
background, correct.
Okay. Well, Tracee, was there anything you wanted to grab in there?
Also, I think, Tasha, I'm hearing you're feeling blamed and accused about what's been happening with social media and around housekeeping. Is that correct?
Exactly.
And particularly around housekeeping, dishes in particular, like accountability and personal responsibility or something that's important to you. Is that right?
Exactly.
And Wesley, I think in terms of groceries, you were feeling used. Is that right? And I'm not sure if that's right. Is it groceries? Is it food?
It's groceries.
And I.
Oh, well, my food that I put in the refrigerator that always comes up missing and have bites out of my sandwiches, groceries and food.
So just to help you maybe if we explain what it is we're trying to get. So as mediators, one of the things we're doing is trying to name the things that you all are talking about, and name them in a way that you will both say, "Yup, that's what I call that thing." And so around it, we've heard the stuff about wanting fairness and around fairness around the financial contributions, want to follow through with previous agreements around what was going to happen with it. And so we're looking for both of you, like, what's the best way to name that thing? It sounds like you're talking about the things that you all eat. So would it be okay to call it food?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
And drinks are included in that?
You can decide that. Would you include drinks?
Because my juice is constantly being
And my water is constantly being drank.
So food/drinks.
Mm-hmm.
So you both are looking for clarity around what's happening with the food and drinks.
Tit for tat stuff. I don't hear about nothing until I tell him what he's doing wrong.
So again, feeling exasperated about how communication is happening around food and drinks. Is that right?
Exactly.
I'm looking for, earlier you talked about direct communication around food and drinks was something that was important to you. And follow through on shared agreements. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So some of the things I want you to notice or pay attention to is how Ericka and I dealt with when participants heard a reflection that didn't exactly resonate with them. We stay present with them and we keep searching with them for the right word that captures it. Initially, I reflected ripped off, and then I dialed it back to cheated, and we came back to feeling inconvenienced.
Inconvenience, yeah.
All right, and so it's not about mediators hearing something different from what they're saying and running. We stay present and we work with the participants to find what is the right word. Also, we always reflect before we ever ask an open-ended question. Inclusive mediators do not interrupt when participants are speaking. So the priority is around them getting able to speak. And you'll notice that even when they escalated, we stayed out, we're collecting our notes so that when we do have a chance to come in, we actually have something to say. And participants in that case, when they feel heard, often will de-escalate themselves. But de-escalating is not a cause to end the mediation or to call a private session. We don't use private sessions to manage behavior. And in this step, we are focusing on what is happening now and what is happening in the past. All of our open-ended questions are about the present and the past. When participants are giving solutions at this stage, we mine those solutions for the feelings, the values, and the topics that they have discussed. Once we do that, we check in and let them know when we will get their ideas that get at the values that they have around those topics. And that is called a process map. Throughout our note-taking, in step 2, what we're looking for is ideally between my co-mediator and myself, I am checking to make sure we understand each of the topics and that for each topics we have enough values that we can frame the topics in step 3 and enough values so that we can support the participants in coming up with ideas in step 4 and substantial feelings so that we can do a reality check at the end of step 4. So a good rule of thumb is have 4 unique values for each participant on each topic and 2 substantial feelings for each participant on each topic.
So something else that can be important about knowing if you're ready to move into step 3 has to do with the open-ended questions that you have in that section of your notes. Have all of those questions been answered, and then those answers been reflected back to participants? If you still have open questions, what does retaliated against mean? What is we agreed on a few things. What were those few things? Talk more, right? Whatever those questions are you had, if they're still open, you're probably not ready to move into step 3. And also around feelings, it can be helpful. While you absolutely want to have good values to frame feelings within step 3, you also want to have feelings that were particularly intense to each participant to bring the relevancy of that topic for that person. That if you need those to help frame the topic as well, that can be really helpful in step 3.
So now we will demonstrate how to transition from step 2 to step 3. So Ericka, I think I'm ready to move on to step 3. What about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. Is there anything else you feel like we need to know before we move on to the next step?
No.
Okay. All right. So at this point, we're going to move on to step 3. All right. We're going into step 3. Step 3 is about identifying and framing the topics. Remember, you do not want to go into step 3 until you have reflected all the topics to the participants and checked in with them about the feelings and values that they've heard. Don't save your topics for step 3. Again, they should have heard all of this stuff before in step 2 where you were doing information gathering. At this step, you want to make sure that you're able to make the topic relevant for each of the participants. So I am checking in on the topic, checking in to make sure I understand what's important to each of them about that topic, and we are capturing their opposing values around the topic. If they have shared values around each of the topic, there's not really a conflict. So you want to zero in on what are their opposing values and use that to make it relevant for each one of them. You'll see as Ericka and I go along that we are framing the topic using their values and sometimes their feelings and listing it. And because of the way the video is set up, we're not standing up to write the topics in between each set, but that's exactly what I want you to do in the real mediation. You sit down, you stay seated, You frame the topic using the values. After you have framed one topic, you hop yourself up, write that topic down on the board, and come back down and start working on the next topic. Don't get up until you're sure what the language is that the participants want you to use to frame that topic is, and you have consensus on that, and then you come back and sit down. Now, make sure you understand, I'm saying you want consensus on the word that you're using, but if it's a topic for one participant, the topic is going to get listed, okay? And make sure you understand that your topics need to be neutral, all right? Have a good time with this. The next stage of the process is to build a list together of the topics that you have discussed and may want to make plans about. So one of the topics I think I heard you both talk about is transportation. And for you, Wesley, I think you were looking for thoughtfulness around your time when it came to transportation.
Right.
And respect for the expenses associated with transportation. Is that correct?
Correct.
And Tasha, I think I heard you saying with regards to transportation that you were looking for some support when it came to transportation.
Yeah.
And consideration for the weather and what kind of load you were carrying that day. Is that correct?
Exactly.
So is transportation a topic to list as part of what's been going on in the conflict?
Yes.
Another thing we heard you both talk about was social media posts. And Tasha, you were saying that privacy was important to you around the posts, and also that your reputation was important to you and related to those posts, and that you felt exposed around how posts have been happening. Is
Exactly.
that right? And Wesley, you were saying that entertainment and fun is important to you in making decisions about what kinds of things get posted.
Right.
And that also previously you felt justified around the post that you made around Halloween, and now you're feeling remorseful about that post. And you're looking for ways to get peace around how you all make social media posts. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So is social media posts one of the things to make plans about?
Oh, we don't need to make plans about that.
Can you help me understand what you mean?
Well, after what he did, you know what, I'm just gonna delete and then block him. So I don't have to worry about nothing that he's saying on social media. You don't have to worry about me.
Okay, so it sounds like you have some ideas about how to get the privacy and the boundaries, it sounds like, around social media posts that's important to you. And so step 4 would be an opportunity to talk about, and so blocking and deleting sound like a few ideas about how to get that privacy and boundaries. And so in step 4, you all would be talking about those ideas and any others that get the privacy and boundaries, and also the entertainment and fun and the peace that you all were talking about. And so right now, this is just where we write the things that you all have been saying you've had conflict about. And step 4 is where you decide which things you want to move forward with, figuring out how to get your needs met around those things. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay, so would social media posts be one of those things you want to talk about, what it's going to look like to get you those boundaries that you're looking for?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So things that I want you to pay attention to with the topics was how I use the values of, for Tasha, support around transportation and consideration for the weather and what kind of load she was carrying, to frame the topic of transportation so it's relevant for her. And for Wesley, I used the values of thoughtfulness for his time and respect for the expenses associated with transportation to make it relevant for him. And we end the framing by asking them, is it something that we want to list? So is transportation something to list as part of what's been going on with this topic, with this conflict?
And then around social media posts, you saw me do a combination of mostly values and then pulling in some intense feelings that were particularly relevant for each participant. And so for Tasha, it was about privacy and reputation, and also that piece about feeling exposed had been really intense for her around the Halloween post. And so I used that feeling. And then for Wesley, there were a few pieces that were helpful in tracking over time how the post played into the conflict. So the entertainment and fun being values, and also feeling justified and now remorseful, right, is something that's really nice to highlight so that both participants get to hear that shift around Wesley's position and what had been happening with social media posts, so that now feeling remorseful and looking for peace around what's the back and forth with social media posts. And then you saw Tasha had some pushback at just hearing the word plan. So here's where, so you heard Tracee use the language, is it one of the things that you've been talking about in your conflict? Like, is it a piece of your conflict? And the language I used was, is it one of the things you want to make a plan about? So either of those phrases are really good to list topics with. And when you get this kind of pushback, when a participant just hears the word plan and they perceive it as, no, I don't want to be on the same page with this guy, you can just go back to making sure they feel heard and understood around that topic, but also explaining what's happening in this process. And so it was important to listen to what she had to say about planning. And now I got new values about boundaries being important to her, and how in step 4, that will be the place to decide how to get those boundaries around posts. And that right now in the process, this is just where we list that thing that she wants to get boundaries around. And so then that makes sense to people who haven't been through mediation training.
So what we have listed is transportation, social media, housekeeping, schedule, and food. If you were to come to solutions on each of these topics, do you feel like the conflict would be resolved?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Anything else you feel like we need to do before we move on to step 4?
That's it.
Okay. So at this point, we're going to start with step 4. And we're about 15 minutes out from our 2 hours. So can we all look at our schedules to see when would be the best time to schedule our next session?
Because step 4 would take longer than 15 minutes.
And after we get a date, Ericka and I will give you some paperwork to fill out, just an evaluation, and you can keep that anonymous. All right. Could we meet, today is Friday, could we do this time next Friday?
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That
that's
works.
good for me.
Okay. All right. All right. And we'll just start with the evaluation, and we appreciate your time. All right, so again, there's one more difference in the video that Ericka and I are not getting up and listing each topic after we frame them. But we do want you to do that in real mediation. You will identify, frame the topic, making it relevant for each of the participants, and then you're going to get up, write that topic up on your chart paper, and then come back to the table and start doing that for the next topic. Okay, you've made it to step 4, where we're brainstorming and developing solutions. So all your work before this is going to pay off now. The first stage of this, you are doing the brainstorming, so you want to help the participants get as many ideas as possible around this topic. Remember, you're working on one topic at a time in step 4, and you're taking it through all 4 stages. And at this stage, there's a few things you want to make sure you do. You'll want to make sure that you have easy access to all the values you and your co-mediator collected in step 2 and in step 3. And you have 3 tools to support your participants in coming up with all the ideas around this topic. The first strategy that we have is open-ended questions. We always start off step 4 with an open-ended question. What are all your ideas around, say, the topic? What are all your ideas around transportation? Then your other strategy is just ask them about one of the value. Even if it's just one participant's value, your question is going to go to both participants. For example, earlier, Jonathan, I heard you say that cleanliness was important to you. What are all your ideas around housekeeping that would get you the cleanliness that you're looking for? Again, that question is going to go to both participants, even though it's just one participant's value. And then the third strategy that we use in stage A of brainstorming is the win-win knit. So I am taking values from each one of the participants, knitting them together and asking them what are all the ideas that they have that would meet both of those values at the same time. For example, when it comes to schedule, I think I heard you say that you were looking for flexibility, and you said that you were looking for consistency. What are all the ideas that you have around schedule that will get you both the flexibility and the consistency that you're looking for? It works best if you use opposing values, and when you do a good win-win knit, expect the participants to be quiet for a while. They have to think about that. So give them that time to think and come up with a solution. That quiet, that's what thinking sounds like.
So we're now going to move into step 4, which is brainstorming and developing solutions. So while the earlier part of the mediation may have been focused on the past, now that you've used the past to have a discussion and define a list of topics, the rest of the mediation is now going to be focused on the future. So we're going to just describe for a minute what the brainstorming stage is going to look like. So we're going to focus on one topic at a time for you to brainstorm about. We'll start by asking you to say any possible solutions you can think of. All ideas are going to be written down. They'll be posted here. Later, you're going to pick the ones you agree to and make any needed adjustments. Once you've decided on the ideas you want, you'll work out the details about what will be needed to really make the ideas work. Throughout the brainstorm process, you can be as creative as you like. So which topic do you think you want to work on first?
Social media.
Okay.
What are all the ideas that you have around social media posts?
Well, I'm just gonna block Wesley and delete him from my page. And so that'll handle that for me.
Tasha is not gonna unfriend me.
And
Well,
Tasha blocks Wesley and Tasha deletes. Can you say that again?
Yeah, I'm gonna delete Wesley from my page.
And then did you need the third one?
And Tasha does not.
Tasha's not gonna delete me, unfriend me.
Unfriend her.
Yeah, she's not gonna unfriend me.
Well, then you need to be more respectful. Don't post my pictures without me asking. Without asking me.
Do you mind if I abbreviate with W for Wesley and T for Tasha?
No problem.
That's fine.
Okay. So your idea again, Tasha, was Wesley what?
He needs to stop posting my pictures without asking me.
Tasha
And
is
another,
only,
oh,
go
sorry.
ahead, I'm sorry.
Another idea in there was Wesley is more respectful. I'm sorry, go ahead. I just wanted to make sure
And
she
I was
caught
gonna say
everything.
that Tasha needs to be respectful when she's making comments about postings that I put up.
Wesley needs to learn to take a joke. How about that?
Tasha needs to learn to stop joking.
That is so ridiculous, because we used to play all the time, and
Right.
so,
We can't play no more.
I don't understand, when did you start getting in your feelings about every little joke? Why didn't you even just say something when you was offended?
Why did you pay the grocery bill?
See, we talking about social media now, I need for you to focus,
I'm just letting you know.
okay?
So it sounds like there were a few ideas in there. Tracee, when you stand up, I'm just gonna make sure that I can be helpful. And then you all were saying, Wesley, it sounded like we had some ideas in there about groceries as well. Is that about the topic of food?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just going back to why it's gotten to this point. So.
Okay, so it sounds like you're feeling fed up with how things have gotten. So when we get to food, that's where you would give all the ideas about groceries.
That's fine.
Right now, what other ideas do you all have about social media posts?
Like I said, if you got a problem with something, I say, just come to me. We in the same house together, and you gonna go on social media to try to intentionally humiliate me. That's ridiculous. Just say something.
What else?
I'll take down the Halloween picture.
So what other ideas do you have?
That's it.
Yeah.
So earlier, when you were talking about social media posts, Tasha, I think one of the things you said was important to you was protecting your reputation. Is that right?
Exactly.
So what are all the ideas that both of you have that would get the protection for your reputations on social media?
I mean, just be mindful of what you're posting.
Who would do that?
Wesley needs to do that. Because sometimes he'll post stuff that is like a private joke between us, and people don't know us, who don't know us don't understand that. And then, you know, they jump in and then make something into something it's not. And so, you know, keep the private jokes off of social media. And when he see his friends getting out of line with me, he needs to say something.
Wesley, earlier you were talking about, it sounded like you missed like the entertainment and fun part of the way you all used to engage with social media posts. What ideas do you have that might get that entertainment and fun? Or what ideas do either of you have that might get the entertainment
I
and
won't
fun?
post any derogatory pictures of Tasha.
Okay.
And if you just stop making me the butt of the joke, then we can laugh all day. But I want somebody that's gonna laugh with me, not at me.
So you felt targeted around some of the posts? Is that right?
Exactly.
What else?
That's it for me.
I wanted to check in because earlier when we were talking about social media, Nick, something that was important to you was respect for your friends on social media, and you were looking for privacy around social media. Is that right?
Yeah.
So what are some ideas that would get both the respect for your friends and the privacy that you were looking for?
I mean, I won't, you know, make comments. I'll think before I make comments on social media. But I didn't think I did anything that was offensive, but
I'm sorry, can you say that idea one more time, please, Tasha?
like I think before I post about his friends.
What else?
Well, I think, you know, it may be helpful if we have a conversation about, you know, what was offensive and how, because, you know, like I had no, until I heard this today, like I didn't even know that we had a Facebook beef going on.
So also looking for some clarity around what the,
Yeah, I don't
what
even
was
know
offensive,
what was offensive.
specifically what was
Uh-huh.
offensive. What are your thoughts about that, Wesley?
That's fine. I agree with that. And I'll go ahead and delete the comments she made about my friends on my page. Well, you can go ahead and strike that Tasha blocks Wesley. And you can strike that, you can strike those two, right? The first two she said.
Oh, so these are.
I just didn't say it right away, but you know, that could be, yeah, you can block that.
I'm just want to check in with you
Right
because
there.
they sound like you're feeling offended by these ideas. Is that
Of
right?
course.
And so
That's why I said the third thing. Tasha does not unfriend me.
okay. So it sounds like participating together in social media is something that's important to you. Is that right?
Well, that's the only way we can have the conversation on what we post, so.
And it sounds like you have some ideas, you know, or likely some of these ideas that kind of allow for you to participate in it in a way that you should respect and respect for your
Right.
friends. And in terms of ideas that you do not like, when we come to the next stage, you'll start picking the ones that you do want to have in your agreement if you decide to have a written agreement.
Right.
And so rather than striking through the ones that you do not like, we'll circle the ones that you both have consensus on.
Okay.
Just in case they're inspired new ideas,
All right.
okay? So in this stage of the process, we would continue to rotate asking open-ended questions to get more ideas, using a single value to get ideas, and we would also use what we call the win-win knit, where we use values that they each had that they had talked about as though they were in opposition to one another. So in this case, I used privacy for Tasha and respect for friends for Wesley to do a win-win knit to get ideas around social media posts. So this is all stage A of the brainstorming process. And now we're going to fast forward to stage B, which is picking solutions.
Okay, and also just thinking about the mediator who's at the table, keeping in mind that this person should not be a potted plant. So you are still an active co-mediator, and so what you saw me doing is, especially as conversations went back and forth quickly, I was also jotting down which ideas I heard coming out, and then I'm watching what Tracee is getting, so that as ideas are going up, I'm able to tell her which ones didn't make it up there. And also at the table, when there were glitches in communication or pieces of escalation, I'm grabbing those reflections at the table so people continue to feel heard and understood right here at the table, while Tracee is still capturing ideas there. So keep in mind that you should still be an active mediator at the table.
You are moving into stage B now of the brainstorming process. So in the previous step, you exhausted all of the participants' values to support them in coming up with ideas that would work for them around that topic. Now in stage B, they are picking which one of those solutions will work with them. So remember, you're going to switch markers and ask them, which one of these ideas do you feel like you can come to quick agreement on? The ones that they agree to, you're going to circle. As soon as they come to an idea that they have some questions about, that they have any hesitancy about, just put a dot by it. You're going to come to that in the next stage and go back to asking them, which ones do you feel like you can come to quick agreement on? Don't let them lose their energy in trying to figure out details on a particular solution. They'll deal with that in stage C. So some of the ideas that you've gotten, and I'm going to read page 1, 2, and 3. Tasha blocks Wesley. Tasha deletes Wesley from her page. Tasha does not unfriend Wesley. Wesley stops posting Tasha's pictures without asking Tasha. Wesley is more respectful. Tasha is more respectful when making comments about Wesley's postings. Wesley learns to take a joke. Tasha stops joking. Wesley and Tasha don't play anymore. And I continue reading the entire list. So which one of these do you feel like you can come to easy agreement on?
Okay, Wesley stops posting my pictures without asking.
Okay, and Wesley stops posting Tasha's pictures without asking Tasha. What are your thoughts about that, Wesley?
I can do that.
Okay. So the ones that you both agree to, I will circle. And if there's any, and if only one of you agrees to it, I'll put a dot by it for us to come back to.
Okay.
What else?
Wesley stops making me the butt of his jokes.
So Wesley stops making Tasha the butt of jokes. What are your thoughts about that, Wesley?
No, I kind of enjoy doing that.
Okay, all right. So we can come back to that and see if there's some ways we can adjust that. Okay.
How about Tasha makes a general post apologizing for any comments that she may have made to offend my folks?
This one right here. What are your thoughts about that, Tasha?
Yeah, never happened.
Never happened.
It'll
Okay.
never happen.
Okay. Well, we can come back and visit that.
Okay.
What else?
So I can think before I make posts about his friends. I can do that.
What are your thoughts about that, Wesley?
Okay, I'm all right with that. And I was going to say down here, we'll fourth from the bottom on that same page, by inboxing each other by private jokes that they want to. Yeah, I can agree with that.
What are your thoughts about that, Tasha?
Okay.
I can also agree to the one above that.
Tasha and Wesley do not share pictures taken at social events without each other's permission. What are your thoughts about that, Tasha?
Yes.
Y'all can say
Wesley deletes the comment.
Wesley deletes comments that Tasha made about Wesley's friends.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about that, Wesley?
I can do that.
What else?
Yeah, I can't
I'm
think
good
of
on
it.
that. Yeah, that's about it.
So, I want to check in though first. Earlier, I think, around social media, Wesley, for you, looking for some ideas that protected your feelings and your friends' feelings was something that's important to you. Is that right?
Correct.
And Tasha, I think I heard you saying like your reputation was important to you around social media. Is that right?
Yeah.
Which of these ideas get address protection for your feelings and your friends' feelings, and get the privacy that you're looking for, and get the reputation that you're looking for with regards to social media?
Well, the center, the center page, third from the bottom.
Tasha's more respectful when making comments about Wesley's postings. What are your thoughts about that?
Okay, I can do that. Well, Wesley needs to be more respectful too, right above it.
Wesley, what are your thoughts about this idea? Wesley is more respectful.
Yeah, we can do that.
All right. All right. Now it's time for stage C of the brainstorming process. In this stage, you're going back to those ideas that had some potential, most of which you probably put a dot by them, but you still want to ask if are there any other ideas that they feel like could work with a little bit of adjusting. Go back to those ideas, again, using their values to ask them, how can they make both of their values work for these particular solutions? Take your time, make sure that they have enough time to think about what would work for them.
Okay, so now we're going to move into stage C of the brainstorming process, and this is where we'll take a look at the ideas that you have dotted. So these are the ones that somebody likes and somebody doesn't like so much, to see what you want to do to adjust these or what new ideas you have about these. So we're going to start with this one, which is Wesley starts making Tasha the butt of jokes. And earlier, Wesley, you were saying that like fun and entertainment was a piece of that for you. And you said you enjoy making Tasha the butt of jokes. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's just fun to do. And my friends get a kick out of it. And I guess at one point, Tasha was getting a kick out of it, but maybe it's gone too far. So as far as she's concerned, because she definitely put that up there.
Okay, so just to make sure I'm clear about what you were saying. So for you, that's about entertaining your friends and having fun. And it sounded like you were, like having fun with Tasha was something that was important to you. And you feel misunderstood around your intentions for those jokes.
Right.
And so now you want to get clarity around what for you changed from it being fun to feeling offensive.
And what
to
prompted her to
Tasha.
make that comment, right?
Okay, Tasha, what are your thoughts about it?
Well, I mean, you know, his comments, yeah, they used to be funny, but now it's changed from like ha funny to more snarky, and just like trying to embarrass me is what it feels like. Like if it's something that, you know, that I would find funny, you know, I would laugh with him, but you know, the stuff that I'm talking about is like not funny, and I think he does know the difference.
Okay, so it sounds like you're saying that you're beginning to feel targeted more recently around those jokes, and it sounds like you feel confident that Wesley knows the difference between what's funny and what's more what feels more like a target. Is that right?
Right, because it just feels like he's not, like we're not getting a good laugh together. Like he's using me, you know, humiliate me to get everybody else to laugh.
Okay.
When it's
So
nothing
feeling
fun about
used
that.
feeling
Exactly.
used in the jokes. So what ideas might get you all? So Wesley, you're saying it sounds like, again, having fun with Tasha is important to you.
So along what she just said, I can make sure that I do not post any humiliating comments towards Tasha.
What other ideas might get you the fun and entertainment that you're looking for, and also the protection?
I mean, if,
And I'm gonna just capture new ideas over here on this paper.
When we talk about,
yeah, I mean, like, if he just comes and talks to me to let me know if he's upset at something I said, then
Do we have that?
I think that would take care of it.
I think we just kind of write it again. It would be
Okay.
Wesley talks to
If
Tasha.
he's upset about something she said.
Yeah, and then we can just check in. Like if I feel some type of way about what he says, and then I'll check to make sure, we okay.
So is that Tasha and Wesley check in?
Yes.
I was gonna say we can probably review it before we post it, so to speak.
You will review it together, is that what you're saying?
Right, that we look at it together.
So I want to make sure I grab this whole idea as well. So was that Tasha and Wesley check-in? What were you saying the check-in will be about?
Check in, like if I feel like he's being snarky, to check in to see if he's upset about something.
To see if Wesley is upset about something when Tasha sees a snarky post.
Another idea I think you were saying, Tasha, was that also you would talk to Wesley if you're upset about something he said. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay, so Tasha talks, okay, to Wesley when
And Wesley, what was your idea?
they review the pictures together before posting, is
Okay.
that what you said? So that's Wesley and Tasha review pictures together before pictures are posted. Okay, so some of the new ideas that came out to adjust this one about Wesley starts making Tasha the butt of jokes. We have Wesley make sure he doesn't post humiliating comments toward Tasha. Wesley talks to Tasha if Wesley's upset about something Tasha said. So Tasha and Wesley check in to see if Wesley is upset about something when Tasha sees a snarky post from Wesley. Tasha talks to Wesley when she's upset about something Wesley said. Wesley and Tasha review pictures together before pictures are posted. So which of these new ideas do you think you could agree to?
I can agree to all of them.
What do you think? Okay. So what I'm going to do is just circle all of these. So the next one that you all dotted for adjustment was Tasha makes a general post apologizing for any comments that may have offended people. And Tasha, you had concerns about this one. What were they?
Yeah, why do I have to be the one to apologize? He should apologize as well.
Okay, so another idea is Wesley makes a general post apologizing for any comments that may have offended people. Is that right? Okay, so is it okay if I put repeat
That's
marks
fine.
for the rest of the,
Mhm.
so that you all know that's what this one is, repeating that one? Any other ideas about that one? What do you think about this idea, Wesley?
If we both do it, that's fine.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, so I'll circle both of these. And so probably when we write this in the agreement, it may be Tasha and Wesley both make general posts, but we'll talk more about that when we get to agreement writing, which what makes more sense.
The final stage of brainstorming, stage D, is about getting details. At this stage, we want to make sure that the participants have an agreement that they can implement once they get home. So we're going to be asking the who, what, when, where, how, getting all the details so that they have an agreement that they can work with. Pay attention to all the questions that you hear Ericka and I asking in the role play, and pay special attention to the reality check that we do at the end of this stage. We're specifically using feelings to make sure that they have an agreement that works for them and that meets their needs.
Okay, so now we're going to go to the ones that you all have agreed to. So these are the ones that are circled. And we're going to get details about what is needed to really make these work. And so we'll take one of them at a time. So with this, and what I'm going to be asking is like who, what, where, when, and how kinds of details, right? So this one is Wesley starts posting pictures without asking T. What details do you all need about how that's going to happen, or by when, or what it's really going to look like to make this one work?
Well, if he just, ask me if it's okay to post my picture and make sure I say yes before he does, that's all we need.
So one detail is Wesley makes sure T says yes before posting. Any other details that you think would make this one?
I can show her the picture first, and then give her yes and no.
Okay.
So that
Shows
might
T.
need to go first
Okay.
before the other comment.
First, okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Any details on that?
Okay,
That's
that's it? Okay, so what do you all think about this one? That Wesley shows T to pick first, and Wesley makes sure T says yes before posting.
Yes.
Yep, you like both of those
I like
details? I'm
that.
just gonna circle these. So this next one is Wesley is more respectful. What ideas do you have about what respectful means and what you want it to look like?
Well, for me, I felt like it was covered in the last one with
the two things we're gonna do about it.
Okay, about posting pictures
Okay,
and how that's
I
gonna
can
happen.
agree with that.
pictures.
Okay.
And then we already talked about him not, making no smart remarks about me.
Okay. What are your thoughts about Wesley?
I can agree with that.
Okay, so the respectful is covered here, and then the other? what
Yes.
did you- Okay, so this last one is, Tasha is more respectful when making comments about Wesley's postings. What ideas do you have about what respectful comments look like?
Well, I guess after we have a conversation about what was disrespectful, then I'll be more clear on what's expected of me. And so,
Okay. So what's the idea that you have? So we have this idea over here about having a conversation about what was disrespectful.
And also having a conversation about what will be posted.
Okay,
talk
so you want to
about-
include that in the
Right,
conversation?
that probably will be covered.
Okay, so there's the details, so in the conversation, and when we get to that idea, we'll get details about when you wanna have that conversation and things like
Exactly.
that. But we'll add here in the convo about what was disrespectful, what did you just say again? What else, what were you saying you wanted
I
to talk
said that
about?
also we were gonna have a conversation about the postings. So
Okay,
in that conversation, we could determine what's,
what's respectful and what's
Exactly.
not, okay. So in the conversation about what was disrespectful,
and in the
Let's see.
conversation about what we're
And-
gonna post. So there was two different conversations.
okay.
So we're having a conversation about what's disrespectful, and we're having a conversation about what we're going to post.
Okay. So in the conversations about, so this is convos about what was disrespectful and about posts, about what to post. Wesley and Tasha will make agreements about what respectful comments look like. Is that right?
Correct.
Any other ideas about how to make this, about what respectful means?
no.
Okay. So just so you know, when we get to writing your agreement, all of this will make sense. But what this idea is saying is that Tasha is more respectful when making comments about Wesley's postings. And the details are in the conversations about what was disrespectful about the posting and what you all will post. You'll make agreements about what respectful comments look like from now on. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. So next what's going to happen is we would do this exact same thing with all of the circled agreements, all of the circled ideas that they have so far. And so it means you get a mini brainstorm a lot of times of each idea, and you don't just automatically assume that all of the new ideas about details, the ones that they're agreeing to, you're still going to go back and ask, okay, so of these new ideas about details, which of these details do you agree to? And then you get, you circle those. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is what we call reality testing. So while a lot of times we're asking for ideas by bringing up values, earlier you said respect was important to you, how you get that respect. Now, in order to test their ideas with them to see if they think they're going to work, we can use feelings to do that. So earlier, Tasha, you were saying that you felt humiliated around some of the posts. And Wesley, you were saying you felt insulted around some of the comments about in relation to your friends.
Right.
If you all were to follow through with the ideas you've come up with about social media posts, would you still feel humiliated?
No.
And would you still feel insulted?
No.
Okay, thank you.
We're in step 5, agreement writing. Agreement writing is one more chance to make sure that all the details are captured so that participants have an agreement that they're ready to implement as soon as they get home. Also in this step, you want to make sure that you have covered what we call our big 3. That the agreement is non-judgmental, that it's also voluntary, and that you make sure that the confidentiality of each of the participants is maintained in the agreement. Also, you want to make sure that you caution participants against signing if they have any hesitancy whatsoever. They have an opportunity to take the agreement somewhere, have it reviewed before they sign. Give them that time. And you can schedule another session just for signing if that's something that would be helpful. All right, so we're moving into step 5 of the mediation. Right here, the agreement writing. And at this point, we've taken the items that you've agreed upon and put them in writing, and there's a copy in front of you. And I'm going to take a few minutes just to read through the agreement, make sure that you're all on the same page about it. And if you are, then we can all sign and make sure that everybody has a copy signed by everybody. Okay? All right. So in the mediation between Tasha Smith and Wesley Johnson, understanding the process of mediation is voluntary and seeks solutions that satisfy everyone involved, the people named above agree to the following. Wesley will show Tasha pictures first. Wesley will make sure Tasha says yes before posting pictures. Wesley and Tasha will make agreements about what respectful comments look like. I would continue to read all the ideas that they wanted in their agreement. So any questions or concerns about the things that are involved in the agreement? Okay?
Captures what we said.
All right, so what we'll do is if you two would sign at the top, and then you'll each have a copy, and if for any reason you lose your copy, there's an original at the center, okay? So if I can get you to fill out the forms that you filled out last time, evaluation forms and the demographic forms, that is to help us keep this service free and accessible.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And as promised, we will destroy our notes at the end of the mediation. In the agreement, we want to be making sure that the agreement abides by the big 3, that it is non-judgmental, that it honors their confidentiality, and that it's voluntary at every stage. If at any point participants seem reluctant to sign the agreement, you want to be willing to go back to previous stages, either step 2 or step 3 or step 4, to make sure they have an agreement that they feel comfortable with. So we hope this video is helpful to you. This is to support you in growing your skills as a mediator. It's something that we owe to the people who take the time to work through conflict nonviolently and are working to use collaborative decision making as a regular part of their lives. Thank you.